Hello, this is an example video going through a model answer for the Bond section, but this sort of content that I'm talking about now could apply to any of the films that you do on Component 2 and the importance of the things from Component 2. So I'm just showing you this one because this got a full marks on every single section. As you can see here, it says on the side, there's a question 3, 1 mark for the first question, which is out of 1. 4 marks for the second section, which is out of 4, 5 marks for the third section, which is out of 5, and then finally 15 in total for the last bit. Okay, now this came from last year. I'm just going to show you what the candidate said. So obviously the first question was about costume, and they explicitly said Bond's suit. Now, one thing to keep in mind on these 1 markers, you will not get credited unless you're specific. Okay, so if it says like name 1 camera angle used in your film, okay, you need to name a camera angle specifically and ideally something that links to a scene. You cannot just write suit. It needs to be Bond's suit. So if it asks you for a costume worn by a character or something like that, you need to name the character as well. Sometimes these will be 2 marks and then the 4 marker will only be 3 marks. If it's 2 marks, make sure that you're writing a bit more. So usually I'll be asking for 2 specific things, okay? So question 3B. Bond wears a sophisticated suit, tick, okay? Because you're talking about it being sophisticated. It's showing an element of it. So this question was about describing the suit or describing the costume. This is typical spyware, a shirt, tie, blazer, and trousers. Bond's suit is dark black and navy, which symbolize how he works undercover and in the shadows. This is a statement piece for Bond and is something that reoccurs throughout the franchise. The audience recognize this and are immediately reassured of Bond's stability and relevance, okay? So the candidate has made at least 4 points. So for the 4 markers, you should be trying to make 4 distinct points about whatever they're asking you to, okay? So please keep that in mind. If it's 4 marks, 4 distinct points. Now, this question may not appear on one of the questions, and it doesn't tend to. There'll always be one of the 3 questions that you've got to answer where they will lack a 4 marker, okay? But on the ones that it does have, please make sure you're making at least 4 points about whatever it is they're asking you to make. 4 sentences is enough. And as you can see, there's some elements that this candidate wasn't credited in, and they ended up picking up 5 ticks in total, even though it was only a 4-mark question. So they will still credit you. Obviously, don't go overboard. This kind of length is totally fine for a 4 marker. Just 4 distinct points, and then you'll get the marks, okay? Okay. Now, they're asking to link to a specific scene here, and in a 5 marker, they tend to want you to link to a scene in some way. But again, you're not writing a huge amount. You're trying to get 5 marks worth, which can mean 5 points, but it can just mean an extended answer, okay? In Silver's lair scene, costume creates huge meaning, so it's asking about costume creating meaning in one sequence. We see an extended shot, reverse shot of Bond and Silver. They are almost mirroring each other, and this is because they are wearing similar costumes. Their sophisticated suits reflect their shared experience in espionage. Silver's darker inner suit reflects that he is the villain and has a dark persona, whereas Bond's lighter inner suit reflects that he is the hero with good intentions. The costume in this scene shows connections between the characters. This is not necessarily a super sophisticated answer. It doesn't need to be, okay? You're just discerning how costume is specifically creating meaning. So what are they wearing? What does it tell you about them? Or what does it tell you about the situation? And notice here, she talks a bit about editing, even though it's a costume question. However, the editing is relevant due to them wearing similar costumes. So if it's relevant and it links to what you're talking about, usually you'll get credited for it. This does not mean that I'm warranting you to say use cinematography and editing in a mise-en-scene question. You need to predominantly talk about the thing they're asking you to. But if there is another element that contributes to that specific element of mise-en-scene or that specific element of cinematography, it can be relevant and you can be credited for it as it's seen here, okay? All right then, so they asked then finally how mise-en-scene reflects the aesthetic of the film. So this needs to be an extended answer. And as you can see, this answer was very extended. So for a 15 marker, you're looking at around about 2 pages in length in order to get a good mark on this section. Now, obviously, it's all about quality over quantity, but I would argue that quantity is a quality of its own, okay? Because if you don't have enough content, the examiner physically cannot mark enough of what you've written, okay? So aim for 2 pages on those 15 markers, or at least 1.5 pages to get into the top bands. So A monochromatic brown-orange colour palette is used during the Istanbul chase scene. This contributes towards the dirty realism of Bond's work in espionage. During the chase, we see crosscuts to London where the office features a blue monochromatic colour palette. This symbolises the new and modern technological side of espionage. Constant focus on aesthetic, colour palette, realism. There's editing here, crosscuts, but it still links to the monochromatic colour palette, another tick. Symbolises the logical side of espionage, tick. There's a large contrast between the two colours, which reinforces the idea of the thematic conflict of new versus old. The blue represents a new shiny tech, but is intangible. In other words, it doesn't change. And it is not able to adapt. So new and old is a theme. Ticked it, and the reason it's being ticked is because we're contributing the color palette to it. Okay, the color palette's the aesthetic. A very long shot of the layer emphasizes the crumbling architecture. Again, use of a shot, which would be cinematography, but linking it to setting, the crumbling architecture. So what does the shot show us about mise-en-scene? You can use things like cinematography, but it must link to the mise-en-scene. If she had just said a very long shot is used and doesn't mention anything else, she wouldn't get credited for it because it's not mise-en-scène. This links to Christopher Nolan's director influence. Post 9/11 cinema became increasingly dark and gritty, more in style with Nolan's The Dark Knight. Skyfall tackles the modern-day threat of cyber terrorism, and Silver's villain is perfect to reflect this. Notice how she's linking in context. It's very brief, but it gets some extra marks. Context is king. Put context into as much as you can, as long as it's relevant to the question. Again, in the opening scene of Skyfall, we see a long shot of a darkened hallway. There's an illuminated figure at the end. We know it's Bond, but presented in this way is new and unfamiliar. It marks a new era for Bond. Use of lighting in the chiaroscuro darkens the immediate area, leaving Bond's face lit up when he approaches. Again, this gives a new feel and look to Bond, one that is much darker. Again, that links to aesthetic. Lighting can link to aesthetic. Aesthetic does not have to be mise-en-scène. This paired with Nolan's influence creates a whole new meaning to Bond. There are many action, typical scenes in this movie. Chases on cars, bikes and trains, vehicles smashing through glass and innocent civilians trying to dodge the carnage. This all gives the film a very heavy action look and defines its genre. Again, a lot written there, but still gets a mark at the end because it links back to the idea of the look and feel of the film. Typical props such as guns also define Skyfall as an action film. However, we see a new unseen element, which is technological side. It makes the audience question whether Bond will be able to survive in this modern era of espionage. Good, tick, tick. And then finally, in addition to Nolan's influence like Joker and Batman, Bond and Silver are two sides of the same coin, and this is reflected through costume. Their shared experience in espionage is reflected in these suits. They're both agents who overstepped the mark and both were betrayed by M. Now, she mentions costume again, even though there was costume in the previous question. If the question does not say that you cannot repeat your answer in C, then you can use some of your answer from C as long as it's not exactly the same. So she's reused costume here to link to aesthetic, and that is totally fine. The question doesn't stipulate, do not use this in the next question. And this question D does not stipulate, do not use your stuff from 3C. You can use it all. Okay, so I hope this has been valuable, and I hope that you're going to be able to use it in your own responses. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.